Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, the Package Tourist, the magical mystery tour called life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is author Neil Barber. Neil lives in London, England, and has been an author, historian, guide, and historical advisor of the British 6th Airborne Division since 1996, while also serving as the manager and packing engineer of Ensigna Construction Limited. Neil Barber has written or co-written several books dealing with the 6th Airborne Division's operations on D-Day, British Commando operations, and notable British soldiers during World War II. Tonight, Neil and I will be discussing his great work in preserving the history of the British 6th Airborne Division. Neil, welcome to the show. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here. And I'd like to start off by asking you, when was the 6th Airborne Division created and who was its first commanding general?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for asking, Matthew. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
The instructions to sort of form the 6th Airborne Division were issued on the 23rd of April 1943. And the man given the task of commanding and raising the division was Major General Richard Windy Gow. Gow had been a professional soldier all his life, served in the First World War, carried on between the wars in India at various jobs, ended up in the War Office, on ironically airborne related tasks, so he was a perfect man for the job.
Okay. What was the emblem and motto of the 6th Airborne Division, Neil?
Well, the emblem was a Pegasus and Bellerophon, as they call it. It's a symbol from Greek mythology, the winged horse. And the motto that General Gow gave the division was "Go to it," which epitomised his attitude to everything with regards to how the division went about its business.
It's interesting, Pegasus and Bellerophon. Okay, so that would explain a future question. Okay, coming up to D-Day now, what was the 6th Airborne Division's objectives on D-Day?
Well, it had sort of three primary objectives on D-Day, which I'll explain, but the overall objective you might describe was acting as a buffer, because all the German armour reserve armour was placed between sort of Calais, Paris and Normandy. Obviously the Germans didn't realise or know where exactly the attack was going to be. They thought it would probably be Calais area. And so they kept their armour to the east, in effect, of Normandy. And with the weakest flank, really, for the proposed bridgehead, seaborne bridgehead, being the eastern end, obviously with the armour in that direction, the 6th Airborne, its overall task was to, say, act as a buffer and fight off the armour, although they did various things to stop that. Obviously, there were three primary objectives. One was the capture of Pegasus Bridge and the River Orme Bridge. The second one was the silencing of the Merville Battery, because it could fire on the proposed Sword Beach. And the final one was the blowing of 5 bridges across the River Deve. Now that's where it all relates in with the armour, because if they blew those bridges, it would force this armour to go right the way round to the south of the division, in effect, and south of Caen. So that was their D-Day objectives in a very basic nutshell.
But Pegasus, what we now call Pegasus Bridge, obviously that's why it's called Pegasus Bridge. It was named after the division, the division motto and all that. That was the real crux of it all, though, Pegasus Bridge.
It was, with regards to we're getting reinforcements across the bridge, ammunition, supplies, that kind of thing. I mean, there was going to be an airborne drop on the night of D-Day and one the next day as well, but obviously that wasn't going to be enough to keep the division going. So they needed that direct link to the seaborne forces. Obviously, working the other way round, they needed to get the wounded out and that kind of thing. So they were very important, and of course they were just as important to the Germans, because they knew if they could capture those bridges, they would be into sort of the flank, the weak point of the bridgehead.
Yeah. How, in your opinion, how accurate was the movie portrayal of the Pegasus Bridge operation in the 1964 movie, The Longest Day?
Not particularly accurate, really.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, it depends how much detail you want to go into, but for instance, when you first see the gliders approaching, they actually approach on what is really the western side of the bridges, when in effect they came from the east. There was a known flat gap near a place called Cabourg, so they came in from, in effect, the opposite direction. The three for the River Ormsbury went in on a kind of a dog leg straight in to their landing zone.
Yeah.
But the three for Pegasus Bridge came in, did a 90-degree turn, then another 90-degree turn to come in back towards the bridges. So that's probably the first thing that I remember is not quite right about it. The actual battle itself, I suppose, is the big thing. There wasn't that big battle. When they actually landed, there were two guards patrolling up and down the bridge, and a few others in a pillbox at one end. But that was it, really. And the action was over very quickly. It was what subsequently happened as well, which kind of depicted the day being a success, which the film doesn't really. I mean, you didn't see obviously the tank or the armoured vehicle being knocked out by a wag of Thornton, that kind of thing. And also you obviously see some of the arrival of the 7th Parachute Battalion, who everyone forgets. It was a 7th Parachute Battalion who dropped to the east half an hour later. We got there about another hour and a half after that. To take over, in effect, to reinforce and expand the bridgehead into Benneville. And the real heavy fighting throughout the day was performed by the 7th Battalion in Benneville. They lost a lot of men, particularly A Company.
Okay.
And I suppose the other thing is with Lovett, because again, little things. Lovett wasn't wearing a white jumper, and they didn't come along the canal like that because there was just too much sniping going on. They actually came down the road towards the bridge itself from what was a T-junction. So it's great to get people interested, but accuracy-wise, it could be better.
Okay. Please tell our listeners, what's it like guiding tours of Pegasus Bridge? Is it more difficult now conveying the significance of the bridge to younger generations today? What is your experience when you guide tours of people to Pegasus Bridge?
Well, it's always amazing to be there, to actually be on the site where it happened. And it's an honour, actually. It's an honour to actually do it. And I try and keep the tours, although obviously we discuss the actions and explain the actions, that sort of thing. The big emphasis for me has always been about the men, and remembering the men, whether they survived or not, but what happened to them and that kind of thing. And that's very rewarding. With regards to the younger generation, I suppose it's difficult because those that come along have a vested interest kind of thing. They're there, they've made the effort to go there because they are interested. So it's difficult to really gauge the interest. I mean, when I have a stall or whatever that and selling books, you get a lot of them coming up and chatting and that sort of thing. So it is. I mean, history. But like most things, if people are interested in history, you would hope that they would want to learn more and more. But it is difficult nowadays. I'm not sure it's on our curriculum in the English schools. To that level of detail, anyway. So it's really, but perhaps the films and things like that and documentaries that do point the youngsters more towards the events. and hopefully they do become that interested. You know, I think if people say, "Oh, history's boring," that was always baffled me, because history's about people and what these people did, and they were extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, I was at Pegasus Bridge myself in 2005, and I walked all over the place. You know, the only thing I didn't was go into that cafe, which is only reserved for members of the surviving members and all of that. But I saw everything else there. You know, where each of the gliders landed, the markers there. I mean, it's an incredible thought there. You know, even visited Den Brotheridge's grave. You know, close by. He was the first man to die on D-Day that day. You know, Den Brotheridge and all of that. I mean, the feeling I always got was humility, an enormous sense of humility, given the enormity of what was waged on that day, that longest day there. It just, the incredibleness, the fact that they landed so close. I mean, that's the most extraordinary thing. You know, they literally, it was a point blank landing right there, which is incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely, with no aids and in the dark. It is incredible. I mean, obviously they did train very hard for that.
Yeah.
They were highly skilled pilots, but even so, you still needed a bit of luck.
Okay.
And they did get it. I think they did get it. It was a mixture of skill and luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with the cafe, it's a shame. I mean, you can go in the cafe. There's no problem with that. But I know what you mean about the humility of the men. Sadly, most of them are all gone.
Yeah, I know.
But there was always that. I never saw anyone who was really, you might just call big-headed or anything like that, or giving it. Yeah. Bragging about things type of thing. It was never ever like that.
Yeah. But their spirit lives on, though. The men may die, but the spirit lives on.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it was. They were out there to remember their friends, and also to enjoy seeing the friends they hadn't seen for quite a while, things like that. So it was always a very special atmosphere when they were there, really. And it's obviously sadly all gone now, but hopefully people will carry it on.
Let us hope. Now let's move along here. Was the 6th Airborne Division involved in Operation Market Garden, which was the airborne assault at Arnhem and the other bridges leading to the Rhine River? Was it involved?
No. The 6th Airborne stayed in Normandy for 3 months.
Ooh.
In that area, and took part in the breakout towards the Seine. So they came home the first week in September.
Ooh.
So that's when they began their refit and recuperation.
Okay.
It was just too close for Arnhem.
Now, is it true that the 6th Airborne Division did fight in the Battle of the Bulge? Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. They were rushed out on Christmas Eve and were there a couple of days later.
Okay.
And they were kind of pushed in from really the most western point of the pocket, or the bulge, and got involved in some heavy fighting at Bure, where the 13th Battalion lost quite a few men there.
Okay, because I know, because I know the U.S. 82nd Airborne was at Saint Vite, the 101st Airborne was at Bastogne. So where was the 6th Airborne Division's area of operations? What was the village or town where they were?
Well, we'd say the most famous one is Bure, which is, it's west of Bastogne.
Okay.
And I think it was about 100, the division lost about 110 men, if I remember right.
Wow, that's horrible. Now, was the 6th Airborne Division involved in the crossing of the Rhine River?
Yes, it dropped at the same time as the American Airborne to the south. 6th Airborne landed in an area sort of east of Wesel called Hammingkeln. Very large area, good number of DZs. Some of the battalions had a tough time, particularly Ox and Bucks, because there were a lot of anti-aircraft guns on the DZs, and a lot of the gliders were literally shot out of the sky.
Is that the operation where Churchill was on the west bank of the Rhine observing the crossings and all that? Was he? So did he?
That's right.
Was he able to see the airborne drop, or was that further off in the distance you couldn't see it?
No, he would have been able to see it with binoculars. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He was right on the Rhine, watching it. Yeah, you're right.
Now, please tell our listeners: does the 6th Airborne Division exist today?
No. There's 4 parachute battalions that remain in effect. The 4th being kind of a territorial unit. But what there's a thing called the 16 Air Assault Brigade, to which 2 of the 4 battalions is kind of attached. And there's a new thing which I'm not really up on, with some kind of a rapid reaction force, which the 1st Parachute Battalion is attached to.
Okay.
So no, the division doesn't exist now, but just on a smaller scale.
Why was
it's
it
only brigade level?
Yeah. Why was it disbanded, Neil?
I think it's just necessity, at the time.
Okay.
Also, the Glider Pilot Regiment, when was that, in the early 50s, that was disbanded and went on. The Army Air Corps took over what they were doing with helicopters and that kind of thing, instead of gliders.
Okay.
So there was various reasons, necessity, operational necessity, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Is there a museum in the United Kingdom devoted to the history of the 6th Airborne Division? If so, where is it located, and can people visit it, Neil?
Yes, it's not specifically for the 6th Airborne Division, but it covers all British Airborne Forces.
Oh, okay.
And it's on a site that's run by the Imperial War Museum at Duxford.
Ooh. Okay.
And it's an excellent museum, and just across the road they've got a wonderful archive as well.
Okay.
And they're extremely helpful.
Now, Duxford, where exactly in England is that? Where is it located?
It's about an hour and 20 minutes north of London.
Okay.
Not far from Cambridge.
Okay.
But it's worth a visit. I mean, say you've got the Imperial War Museum, which is an old airfield, huge airfield, which is still used by vintage aircraft. And so you can obviously visit that as well as the Airborne Forces Museum when you go there.
Duxford. That sounds familiar. Didn't Douglas Bader, the famous RAF fighter, wasn't his wing based out of Duxford there?
That's right. That's absolutely right, yes.
Is that the same facility there where they had the wing there?
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Also, isn't there like a Battle of Britain museum at Biggin Hill in Kent? Is that close by? The RAF museum?
Yeah, it is, yes. Not so long ago they opened that up at Biggin Hill. Yes, you're right, there is. That's very good.
Yeah, if I ever get back to England, I'd love to see that. Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, I can recommend it, yeah. I mean, obviously you've got various other places. I mean, there's another good museum is the Army Flying Museum at Middle Wallop, which covers all the Glider Pilot Regiment during the war, and going back before that with the Royal Flying Corps and RAF in the First World War.
Okay.
But yeah, it's highly recommended. It's very, very good. And that's a place called Middle Wallop in Hampshire.
Okay. Neil, let's talk about yourself. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in London, as you might have guessed.
Okay.
And on South East London.
Okay.
And I went to a place called Shooters Hill Grammar School, which turned into a comprehensive called Eaglesfield. And then I went to Woolwich College for a few years.
Okay.
So that's really, I'm a South East London lad, really.
Okay. What drew you to preserve and transmit the history of the British 6th Airborne Division?
It was a sheer accident, really.
Oh, really?
I'd always done things for my own. I mean, when I was a youngster, I thought about becoming a professional, taking history, that kind of thing. I thought, back then I thought, you could only really make a living through being a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher. So I just carried on doing my own research for my own benefit. And spent, 10 years, in effect, on the Somme with my trench maps and research. And that was my apprenticeship as I look at it.
I mean, the Somme battlefield, the World War I battlefield?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
think that's where I got my fascination with detail, because you can dig so deep and stand on the spot, where these things happen,
Jeez.
with the trench maps and that sort of thing.
What a
But
bloodbath
the
that
beginning,
would.
sorry.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a horrible bloodbath, that place. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was. Again, it's people that interest me, and what really attracted me to that initially was the first day of the Somme, because I don't know if you know about Kitchener's Army,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was the People's Army,
Yeah.
and it was the first time really they'd gone over the top, and
Yeah.
it was a slaughter, and that really resonated with me when I
Yeah.
read about it, and I still feel guilty that I don't get out there as much as I used to, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reason, one of the big reasons I was interested in the war was my uncle, Jeff Hayward, who served in the Middlesex Regiment, and he went right through the war. He was at Dunkirk, Alamein, Sicily,
Wow.
Normandy, and then the MM in Germany.
Wow.
And he had always talked about this terrible place called the Chateau St. Côme. And when I took him out there into Normandy in 94, we went to the chateau, and again he reiterated how bad it was, and I thought, oh well, I'll find out a little bit more, again just to educate myself. And then the following year his carrier driver came out, Dennis Daly, and Dennis was actually inside the chateau when it was being shelled by Arethusa and things like this.
Wow.
So I thought, right, I am going to find out more. And obviously I started digging, and found out the Middlesex really were only there for one night. And that the 9th Parachute Battalion had been there for a week, and they were getting on a week. So I started to ask one or two of the 9th Battalion men about it, thinking they'd say, well, who are you? But no one did. So I just carried on. It became addictive. I carried on going around all around England, interviewing them, going out to Normandy with them, walking the ground, and I spent 5 years doing that.
Okay.
And so I ended up with this massive information, and I fell in love with the area. And that's where my interest in the 6th Airborne came. Of course, if you're interested in that area, then you want to know more about Pegasus Bridge.
Yeah.
So I spent another 5 years initially researching that, going into deeper detail, and it's to the detriment of everything else, really. Obviously, I'm interested in lots of things with the war, but I don't have the time. I have to concentrate on purely the 6th Airborne in Normandy, really.
Yeah. That chateau you're talking about, was that at Sword Beach, or was that a Gold Beach for the British?
Well, it was, as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of east of Sword Beach.
Okay.
There was the ridge. Why it was important, there was a ridge that overlooked Pegasus Bridge, the Breville Ridge, and this chateau sits right on it. And if the 9th Battalion had lost this area, then the Germans would have been able to go straight down across the DZ and cause problems for the British.
Yeah. Wow.
And of course, the 9th had they'd done the Merville battery job. They'd silenced the guns at Merville.
Yeah.
And lost a lot of men there. So it was only the remnants of the battalion that turned up on the ridge. And the pressure that the Germans put on them over those few days was quite extraordinary.
Wow.
And they managed to resist.
Okay. Neil, whenever I interview an author on my show, I always love to ask the standard question. When you were growing up, who were your favorite authors? And of those favorite authors, did any of them inspire you to become a writer, or perhaps influence your writing style?
Yes, one in particular, which goes back to the Somme, actually, was a bloke called Martin Middlebrook. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, but go on.
He wrote a book called The First Day on the Somme.
Ooh.
And it is a wonderful book. Wonderful book. He's since written, I think he's written one of the authoritative books on Arnhem, actually. Now, most of the Arnhem excerpts seem to think it's the best general history about it. So Martin Middlebrook, because I like the way he picked up on people I think it brings it home. You can read about how a battalion took a village and whatever, but you can't fathom what it actually took those men to take that village, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to get to. I like to sort of appreciate what they actually did and try and understand what it took. And the other one I've always loved is a chap called Alex Revel, and he was an authority on First World War fighter pilots. He wrote a book about a chap called Arthur Rhys-Davies, which I still love. He was a fighter pilot in the First World War. He was a captain of Eton, but he kind of took over from Albert Ball. I don't know if you know Albert Ball.
I've heard the name, yeah. Was Ball English or Canadian?
He was English, yeah.
Okay, he was English. Okay.
He was a character that just would attack any number of German aircraft. He was just stupidly brave, and he had a special way of doing it and all this sort of thing. But obviously, eventually he got killed, and they're not totally sure how it happened. But,
tell me something. Tell me if I recall this correctly. Was it Ball? He had a weird habit. He would fly to a certain village in German occupied, was it France or wherever it was, Belgium, whatever, just to read the clock of something. The Germans mounted a machine gun, and when he came to do his annual reading of the clock, they shot him down that way. Is that Ball?
No,
or was that a different?
Ball. No, I haven't heard that story, but no, that wasn't Albert Ball.
Okay.
I think he was got into a battle with Richthofen's brother.
Ooh.
And apparently Albert shot him down, but he came. They're not sure. They reckon he came out. The witnesses say he came out of a cloud, disorientated, upside down.
Yeah.
And crashed in this field. And his father actually bought the field.
Ooh.
And there's 2 marker stones. Well, there were 2. There's one there. Where his plane came down, and that's quite a place to visit. And he's buried in a German cemetery just by the way there.
Yeah. Maybe it was.
Yeah, Alex Revel was. And I'm sorry, and
yeah.
Arthur Rhys-Davies kind of took over from where Albert Ball finished off, and this book by Alex Revel, it's called Brief Glory. Wonderful book.
Yeah. Maybe I was thinking about Frank Luke, who was the second greatest American ace. Maybe he was the one who flew to the village and saw the clock and all that. It was somebody. I was a certain World War I pilot. It wasn't German or French. I think maybe it was Frank Luke, who was the second biggest American ace after Rickenbacker. I think it was Frank Luke. I think it was him, yeah.
I'll have to look him up,
yeah. But I remember, was it Edward Mannock was the greatest British ace, though? 73 kills, correct?
Yes, yeah, well, yes, that's right, yeah. And, was it Mannock? It wasn't Mannock, it was, obviously he was up, no, yeah, you're right, he was Mannock.
Yeah.
It was Mannock, I'm thinking of McCudden.
Yeah.
McCudden was right up there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mannock was, I reckon he shot down more than that, but he used to train the pilots.
Yeah.
And sort of almost put the German whatever out of action and let the pilot come in and finish him off, type of thing. So
yeah.
Yeah, he was a special pilot, Mannock. Yeah.
Yeah. If I remember, was that Richthofen was the greatest German ace, Funk was the greatest French ace, Billy Bishop was the greatest Canadian ace, Rickenbacker the greatest American, and Mannock was the greatest British ace. Yeah.
Yeah. Extraordinary men. I mean, of today's writers, I think there's Patrick Bishop. I don't know if you know Patrick Bishop. He's more famous, I think. He's written a book called Fighter Boys, which is all about the Battle of Britain men. And I thought that was wonderful. He's done one called Bomber Boys. And funny enough, I'm reading one, he's just written one about Paris in 1944 and how it was actually liberated. Very, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Neil, please tell our listeners, where can people find your wonderful books?
I think in America the actual publisher is Saberstorm Publishing, but in America I believe they're available through Casemate US. They're obviously on Amazon, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one's called The Day the Devils Dropped In, which is about the 9th Parachute Battalion at Merville and at this Chateau St. Com. And I say that took me 5 years of research. and it's using a lot of the words of the men who were there. That's what I prefer. I mean, obviously you check the accuracy and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the same with Pegasus Bridge. In fact, I've just updated the Pegasus Bridge book.
Ooh. Okay.
Which is now, it's probably about 20 years effort gone into that book now. So
Yes.
Sorry.
Question about British Commando operations. Were the Commandos taken from airborne units, or were they just regular infantry units just trained for special missions? I've always been kind of curious about the British Commandos.
Well, in effect, they were totally. I mean, ironically, I don't know whether to mention the first parachute battalion because that might confuse things. But no, the Commandos were a totally separate regiment, and they just came from similar to the Paras. You volunteered from, and if you got through the training, then you got your Green Beret.
Ooh, okay.
Question. But ironically, they were. The Lovett's Brigade, of course, came under General Gall in Normandy, as did the 4th Special Service Brigade.
Okay. Neil, tell our audience what will be your next book project, and when can we expect its release?
Well, I've been working again for I don't know how many years it is this time. Probably maybe 4 or 5 again. Probably a bit longer from stopping and starting, but it is about the blowing of these 5 bridges across the River Dee. You might know of one of them, the Troarn Bridge, which was the main one.
Yeah.
It was on a highway that led towards Caen.
Yeah.
And it was, again, it's a very elaborate operation that had been organised. And of course, when it came to the drop, they were spread everywhere for various reasons. To be a very basic description, Major Tim Rosevere, who was in command of the 3rd Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers, he in effect hijacked a medical jeep and filled it with men and explosives and literally drove through Troarn under fire to get to the bridge at the other end and then blew it up. It was quite extraordinary. It is a folklore.
Jeez, a driving bomb, a mobile bomb.
yeah, in effect, yeah.
Man.
But yeah, the book talks about, it follows people and different paths from where the drop-in zones were marked by the 22nd Independent Parachute Company, how one of them was cleared or captured by the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, who were very involved, of course, being part of the 6th Airborne Division, and how the Canadians protected these engineers blowing 2 bridges, and the 8th Battalion was supposed to protect these other 3 bridges. So it's quite a diverse. There's so many diverse paths in the book, but they all end up at these bridges, and it's been fascinating to do. Really has, because you know, when you start digging, you find out things that you've never read anywhere before. And it's nice to put detail and put you in that position of the men on the night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. When requisition this medical jeep, one of the things I'm really pleased about. I mean, it's funny because in most books you read, they just requisition the jeep, but. In reality, what they said was, get you off that jeep and F off. Typical Paras.
Yep.
And these 3 medical blokes were left with about 150 bottles of plasma and all sorts of other medical kit. And what I'm really pleased about is that this Lance Corporal who got all this stuff to them, he decided, I've got to get it to a dressing station.
Yeah.
And on his own initiative, he got these folding bikes and some prisoners and got it all to this brigade headquarters where the medical people were at Le Mans. And that plasma was all they had for 2 days. So his actions saved all those men's lives.
Wow.
And I now know his name. So I'm really pleased about that, and I've got his picture, and that'd be nice to preserve that for posterity.
Let his name live forevermore. That's
Yes, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, it's strange when I toured England in 1989. I spent 6 weeks basically driving around, basically the outer edges. And what always struck me was that whenever you would go to a church in a town, there would always be a World War I and a World War II memorial. I mean, you don't really see that much in America there, but in each of the little villages, all the villages in the UK, you would see, you know, the honorable dead there, you know, in both wars and all. And it was always very humbling when you contemplate that, you know. And I mean, it's just a recognition of it, just the enormity of it, the sacrifices in both of them. England made in both of those wars, and all that. Sacrificed a lot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's astonishing when you think of the impact.
Yeah.
As you say, you can go in the most remote village and they'll have a memorial.
Yeah.
It was a terrible. I mean, all was terrible, but that was colossal losses, really. Which the country could ill afford.
Yeah.
But and I don't know. You can go in. I mean, the Second World War had probably the most biggest reason to actually happen. That way. Whereas the First World War, you think,
I know,
that could have been prevented.
Yeah, I mean, when you contemplate,
well, that's the way Europe was and that kind of whatever. But if only they'd known.
Or else they had better tactics. I mean, you know, you're trying to, you know, Marne, Ypres, the 3 battles of Ypres, Somme, Passchendaele, you know, just the waste of it all, just the enormity of the waste, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it was just that period where they'd never been. Well, I suppose the American Civil War had been the closest to it. But, the increase in technology and that kind of thing, and ever-changing tactics. It was. It was. I think it is misrepresented because it wasn't just. Well, it was a learning curve, wasn't it? It was a very, very painful learning curve. I mean, we know about, obviously, you said about our losses, you know, the German losses and the French losses, of course, as well. And the Americans. Well, everywhere, Canada, New Zealand,
they all did.
Comparatively colossal. Just colossal and heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
I mean, it was a bloodbath. I mean, was it Hemingway called the greatest bloodbath in history and all that when you think about it? It
was a huge tragedy.
Neil, I want to thank you so much for appearing on the show, and I wish you the best of luck in your future book endeavors, and I'd love to have you on the show again when your next book comes out, okay?
That's very kind of you. Thanks very much for having me on.
You take care, and best of luck in your future travels, okay?
And to you. Hopefully our paths will cross in Normandy one day.
Well, I was there in 2005. I mean, I saw all 5 of the D-Day beaches, including Pointe du Hoc, all the cemeteries there, you know, Pegasus Bridge, even I saw the Bayeux Tapestry, you know, and all that. So it is most humbling. I mean, you're just, the enormity of it all, just the significance of it all, just literally the hinge of fate, as it were, you know, in terms of the war, you know, whether we were win or lose and all of that. So you have to salute, you know, all those magnificent men on that long day.
Absolutely.
You take care, Neil.
Yep, and you.
Okay.
All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for my next show where I will be interviewing author Mike Piazza. Thank you and good night.